The autumn rain fell steadily over Portland, Oregon, drumming against the windows of Lincoln High School as students rushed through the corridors toward their lockers. It was October 15th, 2021, and the gray sky seemed to press down on the city like a heavy blanket, matching the somber mood that had settled over the school for the past 2 weeks. 17-year-old Maya Rodriguez hadn't been seen since September 30th. Detective Sarah Chen stood in the principal's office, reviewing the case file for what felt like the 100th time. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as she studied the last known photograph of Maya, a bright-eyed girl with long dark hair, wearing her volleyball team jersey, smiling confidently at the camera. That smile now haunted Sarah's dreams. "We've interviewed everyone," Principal Morrison said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "Her friends, teachers, the volleyball team. Nobody saw anything unusual that day." Sarah nodded, closing the file. "Walk me through it again. September 30th, after practice." Morrison pulled up the security footage on his computer. She left the gym at 6:47 p.m., like always. She was supposed to meet her mother at the front entrance at 7:00 p.m., but she never showed up. The grainy footage showed Maya pushing through the gym doors, her duffel bag slung over her shoulder, ponytail swinging as she walked. She turned left toward the front of the building, disappearing from the camera's view. That was the last time anyone had seen her. "Her phone?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. "Last ping was at 6:52 p.m., 2 blocks from here, near Riverside Park. Then nothing." Sarah's jaw tightened. 2 blocks, 5 minutes, that's all it took for someone to vanish. Meanwhile, across town in the Old Town Chinatown district, 12-year-old Tommy Chen, no relation to the detective, sat huddled under a concrete overpass, his thin jacket doing little to protect him from the damp cold. His brown mutt, Scout, pressed against his side, providing what little warmth he could. Tommy had been on the streets for 3 months now, ever since his foster father's latest girlfriend had made it clear there wasn't room for him anymore. He'd tried shelters, but they always asked questions, wanted to put him back in the system. Tommy had been through 7 foster homes in 4 years. He was done with that. "Come on, boy," Tommy whispered to Scout, scratching behind the dog's ears. "Let's see what we can find before dark." They made their way through the wet streets, Tommy keeping his head down, staying invisible. That was the key to surviving on the streets. Become a ghost. Don't let anyone really see you. He'd gotten good at it, slipping through crowds, avoiding cops and social workers, finding food in dumpsters behind restaurants after closing time. Scout, a scrappy terrier mix with one floppy ear and a scarred muzzle, had found Tommy on his 2nd week on the streets, or maybe Tommy had found Scout. Either way, they'd been inseparable since. The dog seemed to understand things, when to stay quiet, when danger was near, how to sense Tommy's moods. As they walked past a coffee shop, Tommy caught sight of a missing person poster taped to the window. Maya Rodriguez's face stared back at him, the word "missing" in bold red letters above her head. There were hundreds of these posters around the city now, fading in the rain, becoming as much a part of Portland's landscape as the bridges and the rose gardens. Tommy paused, studying the girl's face. She looked happy in the photo, like someone who had people who cared about her. He wondered what that felt like, to be missed, to have someone looking for you, wanting you to come home. Scout whined softly, pulling at the frayed rope that served as his leash. "I know, buddy, let's go." Back at the police station, Detective Chen sat at her desk, surrounded by maps, witness statements, and cold coffee cups. Her partner, Detective Marcus Webb, a stocky African-American man in his 40s with kind eyes, dropped a new file on her desk. "3 more tips came in today," he said, exhaustion evident in his voice. 2 are clearly bogus. The 3rd, woman thinks she saw Maya at a gas station in Eugene, but the timeline doesn't work. Sarah rubbed her tired eyes. Her parents? Holding up as well as can be expected. Her mother, Elena, has basically moved into the community center, organizing search parties every weekend. Her father, David, is offering a $50,000 reward for information. 50,000, Sarah repeated. That'll bring out every crackpot in the state. Already has. Marcus pulled up a chair, sitting backward on it. Sarah, you need to prepare them. 2 weeks, no credible sightings, no activity on her phone or bank accounts. You know what that means. Sarah did know. After 2 weeks, the statistics became grim. But she wasn't ready to give up yet. She'd worked cases that broke open months later, years later. You couldn't stop looking just because the odds were bad. There's something we're missing, she said, spreading out a map of Portland. She didn't just evaporate. Someone saw something, knows something. We just have to find them. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing the streets clean, carrying away evidence, making the city forget. But Sarah Chen wouldn't forget. And somewhere in that same city, a homeless boy and his dog navigated the wet streets, unaware that their paths would soon intersect with a tragedy that had touched thousands of lives. The city held its secrets close, but secrets had a way of surfacing. It just took time, and the right person or the right dog to dig them up. October 2023. 2 years had passed since Maya Rodriguez disappeared, and Portland had moved on the way cities do, carrying the tragedy like a scar that fades, but never fully disappears. The posters had long since been torn down or covered by newer advertisements. The news segments had stopped, the search parties had dwindled to nothing, but for Elena and David Rodriguez, time had simply stopped on September 30th, 2021. Detective Sarah Chen still kept Maya's file on her desk, though it had been officially moved to cold cases 6 months ago. She'd worked dozens of cases since then, solved most of them, but Maya's face still appeared in her dreams, asking the question Sarah couldn't answer. Where am I? The detective had changed in 2 years. More grey hair at her temples, deeper lines around her eyes, a weariness that came from too many unsolved cases and too many grieving families. She'd attended Maya's memorial service, held without a body, without closure, and watched Elena Rodriguez collapse in her husband's arms while the priest spoke about faith and eternal peace. There was nothing peaceful about not knowing. Tommy Chen was now 14, taller but still too thin, with shaggy dark hair that fell into his eyes and clothes that never quite fit right. He'd survived 2 Portland winters on the streets, a feat that spoke to both his resourcefulness and his luck. Scout, now greyer around the muzzle and moving a bit slower, remained his constant companion. They'd developed a routine over the years, mornings at the public library where Tommy would read and use the computers until the librarians got suspicious. Afternoons in Forest Park, staying off the main trails where families hiked and tourists took photos. Evenings behind restaurants in the Pearl District, timing their arrivals for when fresh trash came out, but before it got too picked over. Tommy had learned the rhythms of the city, the blind spots where a kid and his dog could exist without being noticed. He'd gotten smart about survival, knew which churches served free meals on which days, which doctors at the free clinic wouldn't ask too many questions, which cops would look the other way, and which would call social services. But it was getting harder. At 12, people assumed he was just a kid walking his dog. At 14, he looked more like what he was, a runaway, a homeless teen, someone the system would want to catch and process. He'd had close calls with social workers, stayed ahead of them by constantly moving, never sleeping in the same place twice in a row. "We're gonna have to go deeper into the woods soon," Tommy told Scout one evening in late October as they huddled under their usual overpass. The nights were getting colder, and Tommy's thin jacket, salvaged from a donation bin, wasn't enough anymore. "Maybe find an old cabin or something. What do you think, boy?" Scout's tail thumped once against the concrete. Agreement enough. The next morning they headed toward Forest Park, one of the largest urban forests in the country, stretching over 5,000 acres on the edge of Portland. Tommy had explored the outer edges before, but never ventured deep into the wilderness. Now, with winter approaching and the city feeling increasingly dangerous, the forest seemed like the safer option. They followed Leif Erikson Drive, an old fire lane that cut through the park, then branched off onto smaller trails, going higher into the hills. The October air was crisp and cold, fog clinging to the Douglas firs and cedars that towered overhead. The sounds of the city faded behind them, replaced by bird calls and the rustle of small animals in the underbrush. Scout suddenly perked up, his nose twitching, body going rigid. Tommy had learned to trust the dog's instincts. Scout had warned him away from dangerous people, alerted him to cops nearby, found food when Tommy was too weak to search. Now Scout was pulling hard on the rope leash, dragging Tommy off the trail into denser forest. "What is it, boy? What do you smell?" The dog pushed through ferns and fallen branches, scrambling up a steep embankment. Tommy followed, his heart pounding from exertion and something else, a strange sense of foreboding. They climbed for 10 minutes, leaving any marked trail far behind, entering parts of the forest where hikers never went. Scout stopped abruptly near a cluster of large rocks and thick undergrowth, whining in a way Tommy had never heard before. Not his hungry whine or his playful whine. This was something different, something distressed. "Scout, what's wrong?" Tommy pushed aside branches and stepped into a small clearing, naturally hidden by rock formations and dense vegetation. At first, he didn't understand what he was seeing. Old camping gear, a torn sleeping bag, empty water bottles, scattered clothes. Probably just another homeless person's abandoned camp. But then he saw it. Partially covered by leaves and branches, tangled in roots and overgrowth, was a faded duffel bag. And next to it, barely visible, a volleyball team jersey, red and white, the letters forming Lincoln H, the rest obscured by dirt and decay. Tommy's breath caught in his throat. His hands trembled as he reached for the jersey, pulling it free from the vegetation. On the back, partially faded but still readable, Rodriguez, number 7. Scout whined again, pawing at the ground near the rocks, and that's when Tommy saw what had made his dog so distressed. A hand, small and delicate, bones visible through decomposed flesh, reaching out from beneath a pile of carefully placed rocks, as if even in death, reaching for help that never came. Tommy stumbled backward, his stomach lurching. He knew that name, had seen that face on posters 2 years ago, back when people still cared, still looked, still hoped. Maya Rodriguez. He'd found her, or rather, Scout had. And suddenly, Tommy Chen, the invisible boy who'd spent 2 years avoiding being found, had to make a choice. Stay hidden, and let Maya remain lost forever, or emerge from the shadows and give her family the closure they desperately needed. His hands shaking, Tommy pulled out the old flip phone he'd salvaged months ago, kept charged for emergencies at the library. He'd never used it before, never had anyone to call. Now he did. With trembling fingers, he dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? Tommy's voice came out as barely a whisper. He cleared his throat, tried again. I found someone. In Forest Park. I think it's that girl who went missing. Maya Rodriguez. There was a brief pause on the other end. The operator's voice became sharper, more focused. Can you repeat that, please? You found Maya Rodriguez? I think so. There's a body, and a volleyball jersey with her name on it, and other stuff. We're in Forest Park, up in the hills past Leif Erikson Drive. Okay, I need you to stay calm. What's your name? Tommy hesitated. This was the moment. Once he gave his name, once they came, he'd be back in the system. Social services, foster care, everything he'd run from. Scout pressed against his leg, warm and solid and real. The dog looked up at him with those trusting brown eyes. And Tommy thought about a girl who'd never made it home, about parents who'd spent 2 years not knowing, about the hand reaching out from beneath the rocks. Some things were bigger than his fear. Tommy Chen, I'm 14. Tommy, are you hurt? Are you in danger? No, I'm okay, but I can't explain exactly where we are. The trails. I don't know the names. We just walked in deep. That's okay, Tommy. I'm dispatching officers and search and rescue to Forest Park right now. Can you stay on the line with me? Do you have enough battery? Tommy glanced at his phone. 23%. Yeah, I think so. Good. Tommy, I need you to do something for me. Don't touch anything else at the scene. Can you do that? I already touched the jersey. I'm sorry, That's okay. Just don't touch anything else. Move away from the area a little bit, but stay where you can see it. Help is on the way. Can you hear any landmarks? A road? A stream? Anything? Tommy looked around. There's a big rock formation, like 3 big boulders stacked together, and a really tall dead tree, struck by lightning maybe. And I can hear traffic, but it's far away. Maybe the highway. That's helpful, Tommy. You're doing great. Now I need to ask you something. Are you alone? Just me and my dog, Scout. He's the one who found her. Okay. Tommy, are your parents nearby? Or a guardian? Here it was. The question he'd been dreading. No, I don't have anyone. I'm on my own. Another pause. Tommy could hear keyboard clicking on the other end, could imagine the flags going up in whatever system the operator was using. Runaway, homeless minor, social services alert. I understand, Tommy. Right now, the most important thing is getting help to that location. Everything else we can figure out later, okay? You did the right thing by calling. 15 minutes later, the forest erupted with activity. Tommy heard them before he saw them. Shouts, the crackle of radios, the sound of many people moving through the underbrush. Scout pressed closer to Tommy, a low growl rumbling in his chest. It's okay, boy. They're here to help. The first person to reach them was a young police officer breathing hard from the climb, his uniform snagged with brambles. His eyes went wide when he saw Tommy, a thin kid in ragged clothes, clutching a rope leash attached to a scarred mutt. Tommy Chen. Tommy nodded. I'm Officer Rodriguez. No relation, he added quickly, seeing Tommy's expression. You're the one who called it in? Yeah, it's over there. Tommy pointed toward the small clearing. More officers appeared, and then people in different uniforms. Search and rescue, county sheriff, forensics teams with equipment. They descended on the site with professional efficiency, photographing, measuring, documenting. Tommy watched from a distance, Scout trembling against his legs. And then Detective Sarah Chen arrived. She was different from how Tommy had imagined detectives would be. Asian American, maybe in her 40s, with tired eyes but a kind face. She climbed the hill faster than the others, her breath coming hard, her shoes muddy. When she saw Tommy, she stopped, studied him for a long moment. Then she approached slowly, the way you might approach a scared animal. Tommy? He nodded. I'm Detective Chen. I've been looking for Maya for 2 years. Her voice cracked slightly on the name. Thank you for calling. Thank you for not walking away. Tommy didn't know what to say to that. He watched as she moved toward the site, watched as her professional mask slipped for just a moment when she saw the volleyball jersey, the duffel bag, the small hand reaching from beneath the rocks. She stood there for a long moment, her back to Tommy, her shoulders rising and falling with deep breaths. When she turned back, her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. Tommy, I need to ask you some questions, and then social services is going to want to talk to you. But first, I need you to know something. You gave a family answers today. You gave them a chance to bring their daughter home. That took courage. Tommy shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. Scout found her, not me. Detective Chen smiled slightly, looking at the dog. Then Scout's a hero too. A woman in a county uniform approached, clipboard in hand. Detective, I need to process the minor. Give me a minute, Sarah said sharply. Then, more softly to Tommy, have you eaten today? Tommy shook his head. Okay, let's get you and Scout some food, get you warmed up, and then we'll figure out the rest. Is that okay? It wasn't really a question, Tommy knew. The choice had been made the moment he dialed 911. But the way Detective Chen said it, with respect rather than authority, made it feel less like being caught and more like being found. Maybe, for once, being found wasn't the worst thing that could happen. Okay, Tommy whispered. As they began the long walk down the mountain, crime scene tape being strung behind them, Tommy looked back once. In his mind, he said goodbye to the invisible life he'd been living, and hello to whatever came next. The forensics tent glowed like a beacon in the darkening forest as the team worked through the evening, carefully excavating the site where Maya Rodriguez had lain hidden for 2 years. Portable lights cast harsh shadows through the trees, and the constant flash of cameras created an surreal strobe-like effect in the wilderness. Detective Sarah Chen stood outside the perimeter, on the phone with Elena Rodriguez. It was the call she'd both dreaded and hoped to make for 24 months. "Mrs. Rodriguez, we've found remains in Forest Park that we believe are Maya's. I'm so sorry. We'll need dental records for positive identification, but the personal items found at the scene, there's very little doubt." The sound that came through the phone was inhuman, a mother's grief-given voice. Sarah closed her eyes, letting Elena cry, knowing there were no words that could help, no comfort she could offer that would make this moment less devastating. "How?" Elena finally managed. "How did she... was she... We're still investigating. The medical examiner will determine cause of death. I promise you, Mrs. Rodriguez, we will find out what happened and who's responsible. Who found her? How did anyone find her out there?" Sarah looked back toward where Tommy sat in the back of a police SUV, wrapped in an emergency blanket, eating a sandwich someone had brought him. Scout lay at his feet, gnawing on a dog treat one of the officers had produced. A young man and his dog. They were hiking off-trail. It wasn't exactly a lie, but it wasn't the full truth either. Sarah would protect Tommy's story for now, keep him out of the media circus that was about to descend on Portland. The kid had been through enough. After ending the call, Sarah walked over to the SUV. Tommy looked up at her approach, his eyes wary, but not quite as frightened as before. "How are you holding up?" she asked. Tommy shrugged, the universal teenage response. "Okay, I guess." "The social worker is here. Her name is Patricia Morrison. She's good, been doing this a long time. She's going to take you to a temporary placement for tonight, get you some clean clothes, a warm bed." "What about Scout?" Tommy's hand immediately went to the dog's head. "Scout goes with you. I made sure of that." Tommy's shoulders relaxed slightly. "Thank you." Sarah sat on the SUV's running board, putting herself at his eye level. "Tommy, I need to understand how you found this place. It's not on any trail map. It's not somewhere hikers go. How did you end up here?" Tommy was quiet for a long moment, choosing his words carefully. "We were looking for somewhere to camp, somewhere away from people. Scout started acting weird, following a scent. He led me here." "You've been living in the forest?" "Sometimes. Different places." "For how long, Tommy?" 2 years. A little more." Sarah's chest tightened. 2 years. This kid had been surviving on the streets for the exact same time Maya had been missing. 2 children, both lost to the city in different ways. "Why didn't you go home?" Tommy's laugh was bitter beyond his years. "Don't have one. Foster care doesn't count." Before Sarah could respond, Marcus Webb approached, his expression grim. "Sarah, Emmy's preliminary assessment. You need to hear this." Sarah stood, touched Tommy's shoulder gently. "I'll check on you tomorrow, okay? You're safe now." She followed Marcus away from the vehicle, out of Tommy's earshot. "What is it?" Marcus pulled out his notebook, his voice low. "Blunt force trauma to the skull, signs of a struggle, defensive wounds on the hands and arms, and Sarah, she was likely deceased before being moved here. This was a dump site, not where she was killed." Sarah's jaw clenched. "So someone attacked her, killed her, and then carried her body up into these hills to hide it. That's the theory. And there's more. They found evidence of recent disturbance at the site. Not from Tommy and his dog. Someone's been up here in the last few months, maybe checking on the burial. They came back." Sarah's mind raced through the implications. The killer came back to make sure the body stayed hidden, or to add something, or remove something. Forensics is still processing. Sarah looked back at the crime scene, the pieces of the puzzle starting to form a picture she didn't like. 2 years ago, Maya leaves volleyball practice and vanishes within 2 blocks of school. Someone grabs her, kills her, and manages to transport her body into one of the most isolated parts of Forest Park without being seen. "That takes planning," Marcus said, "and local knowledge. Someone who knew these trails, knew where they could hide a body. Pull everything again, all the interviews, all the surveillance footage from that night. And I want a list of everyone with wilderness experience who had any connection to Maya. Teachers, coaches, parents of teammates. Anyone." Marcus nodded. "You think it's someone she knew?" "Statistics say yes, but my gut says this was personal. The way the body was positioned, the care taken in the burial, rocks placed deliberately, not just thrown on top. Whoever did this knew her, and they've been living with this secret for 2 years. Across town, someone else was watching the news. Channel 7 had broken the story an hour ago. Remains believed to be missing. Teen Maya Rodriguez found in Forest Park. The figure sat in a dark living room, the TV's glow the only light, hands trembling as they gripped a beer bottle. They'd been so careful. 2 years of watching, waiting, making sure no one wandered into that part of the forest. 2 years of checking the site every few months, of moving branches and rocks to keep it hidden. And now, because of some homeless kid and his damn dog, it was all falling apart. The figure's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Now." Fear spiked through them, but beneath it was something else. Relief, perhaps. The waiting was over. The secret that had poisoned every moment of the last 2 years was finally surfacing. They typed back, "Where?" The response came immediately. Where it started. Riverside Park. Midnight. The figure deleted the messages, finished the beer, and stood. Outside, Portland continued its evening rhythm, unaware that before sunrise, this story would take another dark turn. Some secrets demanded to be told, others demanded to be buried deeper. Tonight would determine which kind this was. Meanwhile, Tommy lay in an unfamiliar bed at Patricia Morrison's emergency foster home, staring at the ceiling. Scout snored softly on a dog bed beside him, an actual dog bed, the first Scout had ever had. The room was warm, the bed was soft. There was food in his stomach and clean clothes for tomorrow. Everything he'd needed for 2 years was suddenly available. So why did he feel so uneasy? Maybe because comfort came with strings, questions, systems, people who would want to know his story, want to fix him, want to put him somewhere he didn't belong. Or maybe it was something else, a feeling he'd learned to trust during his time on the streets, the sense that something wasn't finished, that finding Maya's body had set something in motion that couldn't be stopped. Tommy closed his eyes, trying to sleep, but all he could see was that small hand reaching out from beneath the rocks, frozen in a permanent plea for help that came 2 years too late. Tomorrow, Detective Chen had said, they would talk more. About where he'd been, what he'd seen, how he'd survived, but tonight Tommy was just a kid in a warm bed with his dog beside him, trying to forget the things he'd seen in the forest, and wondering if coming forward had been brave or foolish. Outside his window, Portland slept, but somewhere in the city, a killer was awake, planning their next move. Detective Sarah Chen sat at her desk at 11:30 p.m., cross-referencing old case files when her phone buzzed. Marcus Webb's name flashed on the screen. "Please tell me you're going home to sleep," she said by way of greeting. "I wish. Just got a call from patrol. Anonymous tip came in about suspicious activity at Riverside Park, near where Maya's phone last pinged." Sarah was already grabbing her jacket. "I'm 10 minutes away." "Sarah, it's probably nothing. Could be kids, could be homeless people, or it could be something. I'm going." She drove through the empty streets of Portland, the October night cold and clear. Riverside Park sat along the Willamette River, a stretch of green space popular with joggers during the day, but largely abandoned after dark. It was also 2 blocks from Lincoln High School, exactly where Maya had disappeared. Sarah parked on a side street, killed her lights, and approached on foot. The park was dark except for scattered streetlights that cast long shadows across the grass. She could hear the river moving in its channel, the distant sound of traffic on the Burnside Bridge, and voices. Sarah moved closer, staying in the shadows of the trees that lined the path. 2 figures stood near a bench overlooking the river, the same bench where Maya's phone had last pinged before going dead 2 years ago. "Told you it was buried deep enough," a male voice was saying, angry and frightened. "No one was supposed to find it, ever." "Well, some kid and his dog did find it, didn't they?" A female voice, equally scared. "What are we supposed to do now?" Sarah's hand moved to her weapon, her other hand pulling out her phone to call for backup. But before she could, the male figure stepped into a pool of streetlight. and Sarah's breath caught. James Patterson, Maya's volleyball coach. The woman turned, revealing her face in the ambient light. Lindsay Garrett, Maya's best friend. Sarah's mind raced. Lindsay had been one of the primary witnesses, had spoken at Maya's memorial service, had helped organize search parties. And Coach Patterson had been interviewed multiple times, had seemed devastated by his star player's disappearance. "We should have come forward from the beginning," Lindsay was saying, her voice breaking. "This has destroyed my life, James. Every single day for 2 years, lying to everyone. Coming forward means prison." Patterson cut her off. "For both of us." "Is that what you want? I want to stop lying. Maya was my best friend and we just left her there. She was already dead. There was nothing we could do." Sarah had heard enough. She stepped out of the shadows, her weapon drawn but pointed down, her badge visible on her belt. "Portland Police, don't move!" Both figures spun toward her, their faces going white in the streetlight. Lindsay immediately burst into tears. Patterson's hand moved toward his pocket. "Don't!" Sarah commanded, her weapon coming up. "Hands where I can see them, both of you!" Patterson's hands slowly rose. "Detective Chen, this isn't... We were just... Save it." Sarah's voice was ice. "Lindsay Garrett, James Patterson, you're both under arrest as persons of interest in the death of Maya Rodriguez. You have the right to remain silent." As she read them their Miranda rights, backup arrived. 3 patrol cars, lights flashing, officers securing the scene. Sarah handcuffed them separately, put them in different vehicles, and immediately called Marcus. "We've got them," she said simply. At the police station, Sarah and Marcus separated the suspects into different interview rooms. Standard protocol. Let them stew for a while, wonder what the other was saying, let the fear and guilt work on them. Sarah chose to interview Lindsay first. The young woman, now 19, no longer the 17-year-old girl who'd reported her best friend missing, sat at the metal table, tears streaming down her face, hands shaking. "I didn't kill her," Lindsay said before Sarah could even start the recorder. "I swear to God, I didn't kill Maya." Sarah sat down across from her, her expression neutral. "Then tell me what happened, from the beginning." Lindsay wiped her eyes, took a shuddering breath. Maya and Coach Patterson were... They were having an affair. It started in junior year. He was 28, she was 16. She thought she was in love with him. Sarah's stomach turned, but her face remained impassive. "Go on." That night, September 30th, Maya was supposed to meet him after practice. Not her mom, him. They'd done it before. He'd pick her up a few blocks from school, where there were no cameras. But that night, I followed them. I'd been telling Maya for weeks that what they were doing was wrong, that she needed to end it. She wouldn't listen. Where did they go? His car, parked near Riverside Park. I watched them arguing. Maya was crying, saying she was going to tell her parents, tell the school. She was tired of hiding. Coach Patterson was angry, telling her she'd ruined both their lives, that she was being selfish. Lindsay's voice dropped to barely a whisper. And then he hit her, just once, but so hard. She fell and hit her head on the car door frame. There was so much blood, she stopped moving. Sarah leaned forward. "What did you do, Lindsay?" "I panicked. I ran to them. Checked for a pulse. She was dead. Just like that, Maya was dead. And Coach Patterson was freaking out, saying his life was over, that he'd go to prison, lose everything. He begged me to help him, said if we just made it look like she disappeared, if we hid the body, no one would ever know. And you agreed." "I was 17. Lindsay's voice rose. "I was scared and in shock, and he kept saying we'd both go to jail, that I was an accessory just for being there. So I helped him. We put Maya in his trunk. He drove her to Forest Park. He'd been hiking there his whole life, knew every trail. I followed in my car, and we buried her." Sarah's jaw clenched. "You let her family suffer for 2 years. You spoke at her memorial service. You organized search parties for a girl you knew was dead." "Every day has been torture," Lindsay sobbed. "Every single day. I almost came forward 100 times, but I was scared. And the longer I waited, the worse it got. Why meet him tonight? Because it's over. Because that boy found her, and it's all going to come out anyway. I wanted to convince James to turn himself in, to finally tell the truth. Sarah stood. The truth is going to come out, Lindsay. All of it. And a judge and jury will decide what happens next. In the other interview room, James Patterson sat with his lawyer, maintaining his innocence, claiming Lindsay was lying, that he barely knew Maya outside of volleyball practice. But his story was already falling apart. Forensic teams were searching his car, his home, his phone records from 2 years ago. By 3 a.m., they had enough evidence to charge him with second-degree murder and concealment of a crime. Lindsay was charged as an accessory after the fact. Sarah stepped outside into the cold October air, exhausted, but feeling something she hadn't felt in 2 years. Closure. Not for herself, but for Elena and David Rodriguez, who would finally know what happened to their daughter. It wasn't the ending anyone wanted, but it was the truth. And sometimes the truth was all you could offer. The morning news exploded across Portland like a bomb. By 7 a.m., every local station had reporters outside the police station, their urgent voices overlapping as they broke the story. Arrest made in Maya Rodriguez case. Volleyball coach charged with murder. Tommy woke to the sound of the television in Patricia Morrison's living room. He shuffled out in borrowed pajamas, Scout trailing behind him, to find Patricia watching the news with tears running down her face. That poor girl, Patricia whispered, and her coach, someone she trusted. Tommy stood in the doorway, watching footage of James Patterson being led out of the police station in handcuffs, his head down, cameras flashing. Then Lindsay Garrett, looking haunted and small, being escorted by a female officer. The girl helped cover it up, Tommy asked. Patricia nodded. According to the report, she was there when it happened. She helped hide the body. She turned to Tommy, her expression softening. You gave that family answers, sweetheart. You should be proud of that. But Tommy didn't feel proud. He felt hollow. He'd found a dead girl, exposed a terrible secret, and now everything was unraveling in ways he didn't fully understand. The news was calling him an unnamed minor and a local youth, but he wondered how long his anonymity would last. As if reading his mind, Patricia turned off the TV. Detective Chen called this morning. She wants to talk to you again, but I told her to give you a day to rest. You've been through enough. What happens to me now? Tommy asked quietly. Patricia patted the couch beside her, and Tommy sat down. Scout immediately jumped up between them, and Patricia didn't object. Well, legally, I'm your emergency placement for 72 hours. After that, there's a hearing to determine longer-term placement. But Tommy, she hesitated. I've been doing this for 23 years. I've seen a lot of kids come through this system, and I've got to tell you, you're different. And different how? You survived 2 years on your own. You kept your dog alive. You made the hard choice to come forward when you found Maya, even knowing it meant exposing yourself. That takes character. She smiled gently. I've already made some calls. If you're willing, and if the judge agrees, I'd like you to stay here. Not as emergency placement, as long-term foster care. Tommy stared at her. Why would you want that? Because you're a good kid who's had a raw deal. And because Scout and I are already best friends. She scratched the dog's ears. What do you say? Tommy didn't trust himself to speak. Instead, he just nodded. At the Rodriguez home in the Laurelhurst neighborhood, Elena sat at her kitchen table surrounded by family and friends, her face pale but calm. The kind of calm that comes after a storm has passed, leaving only devastation in its wake. Detective Chen had arrived early that morning to deliver the full story in person. Elena deserved that much, not to hear the details from the news, but from someone who'd fought for her daughter. He killed her because she was going to tell, Elena said, her voice flat, because she was going to do the right thing and expose their relationship. She spat the last word like poison. Yes, Sarah confirmed gently, and that girl, Lindsay. Maya loved her like a sister, and she helped hide my baby in the woods like trash. David Rodriguez sat beside his wife, holding her hand, his own face carved from stone. What kind of sentence will they get? Patterson is being charged with second-degree murder and concealment. He's looking at 25 years minimum, possibly life. Lindsay's charges are lesser, accessory after the fact, obstruction of justice. She'll do time, but significantly less. Maybe 5 to 10 years, depending on her cooperation and the prosecutor's recommendations. It's not enough, David said quietly. Nothing would be enough. Sarah had no response to that. He was right. The boy who found her, Elena said suddenly. I want to meet him. Mrs. Rodriguez, he's a minor and he's been through a lot. I know, but I need to thank him. Please, detective, can you arrange it? Sarah thought about Tommy, about his wariness of attention, his instinct to stay hidden. But she also saw the desperation in Elena's eyes, the need for some kind of closure beyond just knowing what happened. I'll ask him, but it has to be his choice. Later that afternoon, Sarah drove to Patricia Morrison's house and found Tommy in the backyard, throwing a tennis ball for Scout. The dog, despite his age and scars, bounded after it with puppyish enthusiasm. He seems happy, Sarah observed. Tommy caught the ball Scout returned, threw it again. First time he's had a real yard to play in. He's lived his whole life on the streets or in the woods. What about you? Are you happy? Tommy shrugged. It's weird, sleeping in a bed, eating regular meals, having someone ask how my day was. But yeah, I guess I am. Patricia's nice. She doesn't ask too many questions. Sarah sat on the back porch steps. Tommy, Maya's mother wants to meet you, to thank you for finding her daughter. But I told her it's completely up to you. If you're not ready or if you don't want to, that's okay. Tommy was quiet for a long time, watching Scout chase the ball. Will there be media? Cameras? No, just you, her family, and me. Private meeting whenever you're ready. What would I even say to her? You don't have to say anything. Just being there might be enough. Tommy turned to look at Sarah. Do you think finding Maya helps? I mean, they know she's dead now. They know what happened. But does that actually make it better or just different? Sarah considered the question carefully. I think it helps, not because it makes the pain less, but because not knowing is its own special kind of torture. Every car that drives by, every girl with long dark hair, every time the phone rings, they wondered if it was her. Now they know, and they can start to heal, even if the wound never fully closes. Tommy nodded slowly. Okay, I'll meet them. But can Patricia come with me? Of course. Ooh, and Scout? Sarah smiled. Scout's the real hero here. Of course he can come. That evening, the meeting was arranged for the following day at a neutral location, a quiet room at the church where Maya's memorial service had been held. Elena, David, and Maya's younger sister Rosa would be there, Tommy, Patricia, and Scout, and Detective Chen to facilitate. As Sarah drove home that night, her phone rang. Marcus. Sarah, we've got a problem. James Patterson's lawyer is claiming the confession we got from Lindsay is inadmissible, says she was coerced, not properly advised of her rights because she was in emotional distress. Sarah's hands tightened on the steering wheel. That's garbage. We followed protocol to the letter. I know, but his lawyer is good and he's going to fight this hard. We need physical evidence tying Patterson to the crime scene. The forensics team is working overtime, but 2 years in the elements. It's not looking great. What about his car? Sold it 18 months ago. New owners had it detailed twice. If there was ever any evidence, it's long gone. Sarah pulled over, her mind racing through options. What about Patterson's phone records from that night? GPS data. Already subpoenaed. But Sarah, even if we prove he was in that area, his lawyer will say it's circumstantial. We need Lindsay's testimony to hold. Then we make sure it holds. I'm not letting this bastard walk on a technicality. Neither am I. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. Sarah hung up, staring out at the Portland skyline. They'd found Maya. They'd caught her killer. But the fight wasn't over. Justice rarely came easy, but it always came worth fighting for. The morning of the meeting, Tommy woke early, his stomach twisted in knots. He'd faced hunger, cold, dangerous people, and 2 years of uncertainty on the streets. But somehow this felt harder, Facing a mother whose daughter he'd found buried in the woods, what could he possibly say to her? Patricia made him a full breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, bacon, but Tommy could barely eat. Scout sensed his anxiety and stayed pressed against his leg under the table. "It's normal to be nervous," Patricia said gently, "but remember, they asked to meet you. They want to thank you, not blame you." "I know. It just feels wrong, you know? Like I should have found her sooner or done something different." "Tommy, you were 12 years old when Maya disappeared. You were fighting to survive. You didn't do anything wrong. You did something incredibly brave." At 10 a.m., Detective Chen picked them up. The drive to St. Mary's Church was quiet, Tommy staring out the window at the city he'd navigated as a ghost for 2 years. Everything looked different now, less threatening, but also less familiar. He wasn't invisible anymore. The church sat in a quiet neighborhood, its white steeple reaching toward the gray October sky. Father Michael, who'd presided over Maya's memorial service, met them at a side entrance and led them to a small meeting room with comfortable chairs arranged in a circle. Elena and David Rodriguez were already there, along with Maya's younger sister Rosa, who was now 15, the same age Maya had been when she'd started her relationship with Coach Patterson. The family resemblance was striking. Rosa had the same dark hair and bright eyes, though hers were now red from crying. Elena stood when Tommy entered, and for a moment they just looked at each other. Then she crossed the room and, to Tommy's surprise, pulled him into a gentle hug. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for bringing our Maya home." Tommy stood stiffly, unsure how to respond, his throat tight with emotion. Scout whined softly, and Elena pulled back, noticing the dog for the first time. "This is Scout?" she asked. Tommy nodded. "He's the one who actually found her. I was just following him." Elena knelt down and Scout approached cautiously, sniffing her hand before allowing her to pet him. "Then you're a good boy, aren't you? Such a good, smart boy." David stood and extended his hand to Tommy. "I'm David. This is our daughter Rosa. Please sit down." They arranged themselves in the circle, Patricia beside Tommy for support, Sarah slightly back as an observer. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Elena began. "I need you to understand something, Tommy. For 2 years, we've been living in limbo. Every day I would think, maybe today she'll come home. Maybe today someone will find her alive. I couldn't grieve because I couldn't accept that she was gone. I couldn't move forward because I was always looking back, waiting." Her voice cracked, but she continued. "Now I know. I know what happened to my baby. I know she's not coming home. And it's the worst pain imaginable. But it's closure. Does that make sense?" Tommy nodded slowly. Detective Chen said something like that not knowing is its own kind of torture. "It is," David agreed. "We've been able to start the grieving process now. We're planning a real funeral, a real burial. We can say goodbye properly. That's because of you." Rosa, who'd been silent until now, spoke up. "The news is saying you lived on the streets for 2 years, that you were homeless." Tommy tensed, wondering if this was judgment, but Rosa's expression was one of curiosity, not disdain. "Yeah, since I was 12. That must have been really hard. Sometimes, but Scout made it better. Having someone who needed me, who counted on me, it gave me a reason to keep going." Rosa looked at her parents, then back at Tommy. "Maya kept a journal. The police found it in her room when she first disappeared. I read it later. She wrote about feeling trapped, about wanting to tell the truth but being scared. She wrote that she felt invisible, like nobody really saw her except Coach Patterson." Elena's face tightened with pain at the mention of Patterson's name, but she didn't interrupt. Rosa continued, "But she was wrong. We saw her. We loved her. And I think she would be glad that you found her. Someone who understood what it felt like to be invisible, to be trying to survive. Someone who made the brave choice to come forward even when it was hard." Tommy felt tears stinging his eyes. "I'm sorry I couldn't save her." "Oh, honey," Elena said, her own tears flowing freely. "You did save her. You saved her from being lost forever. You gave us our daughter back." They talked for another hour, sharing stories. Elena and David told Tommy about Maya, her love of volleyball, her terrible singing voice, her dream of becoming a veterinarian, how she'd volunteer at the animal shelter every Saturday morning. Rosa shared memories of her big sister, the way Maya would braid her hair before school, how she'd sneak Rosa extra desserts at dinner. In turn, Tommy found himself opening up in ways he hadn't expected, talking about his time on the streets, the kindness of strangers who'd helped him, the library where he'd spent his mornings reading, the woods where he and Scout had found temporary homes. "What happens to you now?" David asked. Tommy glanced at Patricia. "If the judge approves it, I'll be staying with Patricia. Long-term foster care." "And school?" Elena asked. "I'll be enrolling at Madison High next week. Starting 9th grade, even though I missed a lot." Elena reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. "Tommy, we want you to have this. It's part of the reward money we offered for information about Maya. $50,000. Tommy's eyes went wide. "I can't take that. I didn't do it for money. I didn't even know about the reward." "We know," David said, "but we want you to have it anyway. Use it for school, for Scout's vet care, for whatever you need. You gave us answers. Let us help give you a fresh start." Tommy looked at Patricia, who nodded encouragingly. "It's okay to accept help, Tommy. You've been alone long enough." With trembling hands, Tommy took the envelope. "Thank you. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Elena said. "Just promise me something. Promise me you'll take care of yourself. Go to school, build a good life. Maya doesn't get that chance anymore, but you do. So live for both of you." Tommy nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. As the meeting ended, Elena hugged Tommy again, and this time he hugged her back. They were both survivors of Maya's story, bound together by tragedy, but also by hope. The hope that something good could come from something so terrible. Outside the church, as Detective Chen drove them back to Patricia's house, Tommy stared at the envelope in his hands. $50,000, he whispered. "Scout, do you know what this means? We can do anything." Patricia smiled from the front seat. "What's the first thing you want to do with it?" Tommy thought for a moment. "Get Scout checked by a real vet. Make sure he's healthy. Maybe get him one of those special dog beds that's good for older dogs." Sarah caught his eye in the rearview mirror. "That's a good start. What else?" "I don't know. I've never had money before. Never had options." "Well, you do now," Patricia said, "and we'll help you figure it out, one step at a time." As they pulled up to Patricia's house, Tommy saw a news van parked across the street. His stomach dropped. "They found out," he said quietly. Sarah's expression hardened. "Stay inside. Don't talk to any reporters. I'll handle this." But as Tommy watched Sarah approach the news van, watched her stern conversation with the reporter, he realized something had fundamentally changed. He wasn't invisible anymore. For better or worse, his story was public now. He was Tommy Chen, the boy who'd found Maya Rodriguez, and somehow he'd have to learn to live with that. 3 months later, January 2024. The courtroom was packed for James Patterson's sentencing hearing. Tommy sat between Patricia and Detective Chen, Scout lying quietly at his feet. The judge had made a special exception allowing the dog in court, recognizing Scout's role in solving the case. Patterson sat at the defense table, his expensive suit unable to hide the weight he'd lost, the grey that had crept into his hair. He'd eventually pled guilty to second-degree murder and concealment, taking a plea deal after forensic evidence from Maya's remains, trace DNA, fiber evidence from his old car that matched samples from his home, had proved impossible to refute. Lindsay Garrett had already been sentenced to 6 years for her role, with the possibility of parole after 4. She'd testified against Patterson, providing detailed accounts of that night and the years of manipulation and fear that had kept her silent. Judge Margaret Thornton, a stern woman in her 60s with sharp eyes, reviewed the sentencing guidelines. "Mr. Patterson, you were in a position of trust. Maya Rodriguez was your student, your player, someone who looked up to you. Instead of protecting her, you exploited her. And when she threatened to expose your crimes, you killed her. Then you compounded that horror by hiding her body and lying to her family, to the community, to everyone who searched for her. Patterson's lawyer whispered something to him, and he stood. Your Honor, if I could say something— No, the judge cut him off. You've had months to speak. Today, I'm interested in what Maya's family has to say. Elena Rodriguez stood, her hands gripping a printed statement. Her voice was steady, though tears ran down her face. My daughter was 16 years old. She had her whole life ahead of her. College, career, maybe a family of her own someday. You took all of that from her. You took her from us. But more than that, you stole 2 years where we could have been grieving, where we could have said goodbye properly. Instead, we lived in torment, not knowing if our baby was alive and suffering somewhere or dead and alone. That cruelty is unforgivable. She looked directly at Patterson. I hope you think about Maya every day for the rest of your life. I hope her face haunts your dreams the way it haunts mine. And I hope that wherever you end up, you never know a moment of peace. David and Rosa gave their statements next. Equally powerful, equally devastating. Then Judge Thornton pronounced sentence. James Patterson, I hereby sentence you to 28 years in the Oregon State Penitentiary for second-degree murder, with an additional 5 years for concealment of a crime, to be served consecutively. You will be eligible for parole after serving a minimum of 25 years. In addition, you are permanently barred from any employment involving minors, and upon your eventual release, you will register as a predator. The gavel came down with finality. Patterson was led away in handcuffs, his head down, his shoulders slumped. Eleanor collapsed into David's arms, sobbing, not from sadness, but from relief. It was over. Finally, truly over. Outside the courthouse, a small group had gathered. Maya's former teammates, teachers from Lincoln High, friends and family who'd searched for her, and community members who'd followed the case. They formed a quiet, respectful crowd, many holding candles even in the daylight. Eleanor approached Tommy, who'd been trying to slip away quietly with Patricia and Scout. Wait, she called. Please. Tommy turned, and Eleanor pulled him into another hug. Thank you for being here today, for seeing this through. I wanted to be here for Maya and for you. How's school going? Rosa asked, joining them. Tommy smiled slightly. Good, actually. It's weird being in a classroom after 2 years, but my teachers are patient, and I'm catching up fast. And Scout? David asked, leaning down to pet the dog. The vet says he's healthy for his age, just some arthritis, but we're managing it with medication. Tommy's hand went automatically to Scout's head. He's happy. We both are. Sarah Chen approached the group, Marcus beside her. The Rodriguez family would like to make a statement to the press. Would you be willing to stand with them, Tommy? You don't have to say anything. Just be there. Tommy hesitated, looking at Patricia. It's your choice, she said gently. Always your choice. Tommy thought about the boy he'd been 3 months ago. Invisible, alone, afraid. Then he thought about the person he was becoming, someone who went to school, had a home, had people who cared about him, someone who'd made a difference. Okay, he said, I'll stand with them. They gathered on the courthouse steps, Eleanor and David at the center, Tommy and Rosa slightly behind them with Patricia and Sarah. Cameras flashed, reporters called out questions, but Eleanor raised her hand for silence. Today, justice was served for our daughter Maya, she began, her voice carrying across the crowd. But this case is about more than just one family's tragedy. It's about the importance of speaking up when something is wrong, even when it's scary. It's about the courage it takes to do the right thing, like my daughter tried to do, and like the young man standing behind me did when he found Maya and chose to come forward. She turned, gesturing to Tommy. Tommy Chen and his dog Scout gave us the greatest gift possible. They brought our daughter home, and in doing so, they reminded us all that heroism doesn't always look the way we expect. Sometimes it's a homeless kid with a loyal dog, doing what's right even when it cost him everything. Tommy felt his face flush as cameras turned toward him, but he stood his ground. Scout pressed against his leg, Patricia's hand on his shoulder. "We're also here to announce the Maya Rodriguez Memorial Scholarship," David continued. "Using the remaining reward money and donations from the community, we've established a fund to help at-risk youth pursue education. Kids who, like Tommy, have fallen through the cracks but deserve a chance to succeed." The crowd erupted in applause. Tommy felt overwhelmed, but also something else. Proud. Not of finding Maya exactly, but of being part of something bigger than himself, part of a community healing together. That evening, back at Patricia's house, Tommy sat at the kitchen table working on homework. Geometry problems that would have seemed impossible 3 months ago, but now made sense with patient tutoring. Scout dozed on his bed nearby, occasionally twitching in dreams. Patricia brought him hot chocolate, sitting across from him. "Big day." "Yeah." Tommy set down his pencil. "Patricia, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Why me? Why did you decide to foster me? You could have any kid." Patricia smiled, her eyes warm. "Because when I met you that first day, I saw something special. You'd survived impossible circumstances, kept your dog alive, maintained your humanity and ethics, even when it would have been easier not to. Those are the qualities that make a good person, Tommy, and good people deserve good homes." "I'm still figuring out how to be in a home," Tommy admitted. "Sometimes I wake up and panic, thinking I'm still on the streets, or I hoard food in my room without meaning to. That's normal. Trauma doesn't disappear overnight. But you're working with the counselor. You're building new patterns. Give yourself time." Tommy nodded, returning to his homework. But after a moment, he looked up again. "Do you think Maya would be proud of what her family is doing, the scholarship and everything?" Patricia considered the question carefully. "I think Maya would be grateful that something good is coming from something terrible. And I think she'd be especially proud that you're not just surviving anymore, you're thriving." Late that night, unable to sleep, Tommy took Scout for a walk around the quiet neighborhood. The January air was cold but clear, stars visible above Portland's ambient light. They walked past houses with warm lights in windows, families visible inside, living their normal lives. Tommy thought about Maya, about the girl who'd never have this, never have quiet walks or warm homes or the chance to grow up. He thought about the 2 years they'd both been lost, her in the ground and him on the streets, both invisible in different ways. But they'd been found, both of them. And while Maya's story had ended in tragedy, Tommy's was still being written. He looked down at Scout, who looked back with those trusting brown eyes. "We did good, didn't we, boy?" Tommy whispered. "We helped her family find peace, and we found a home." Scout's tail wagged, answer enough. As they walked back toward Patricia's house, toward warmth, safety, and the future, Tommy realized something profound. He'd spent 2 years trying to be invisible, trying to not be found. And in finding Maya, he'd been found too. By Patricia, by the Rodriguez family, by a community that had embraced him. He was no longer a lost kid. He was Tommy Chen, student at Madison High, resident of Patricia Morrison's home, owner of the world's best dog, and someone with a future full of possibilities. And that, he thought as Scout pressed against his leg and they climbed the front steps together, was worth everything he'd been through to get here. The lights were on inside. Patricia had left the porch light on for him. He was home.